joined by Harry Littman of the Talking Feds YouTube channel, Talking Feds podcast. Make sure you subscribe to both. Harry, what I want to talk about right now is Democratic leaders in the Senate, led by Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, sending a letter to the Department of Justice requesting that a special counsel be appointed to launch a criminal investigation into Clarence Thomas about the various gifts that he has received and the systemic corruption that has been shown over and over again, specifically with Clarence Thomas, both in terms of the gifts that have now been belatedly disclosed and also a number of gifts that have not been disclosed. Let me just show you a portion of this letter. I think calling for this investigation is certainly different than one actually being launched. There's limitations, I think, unfortunately, about what can or can't happen here. But I think it is important that this be a major focus where you have a Supreme Court justice not recusing themselves, and Clarence Thomas providing roadmaps as well to Trump-appointed judges like Judge Eileen Cannon in terms of how she could try to dismiss cases against Donald Trump. And while his wife, Clarence Thomas's wife, was there on January 6th and was text messaging Trump's chief of staff at the time, Mark Meadows, acting like there's a holy war and Biden needs to be taken down and all of that. Anyway, here's the letter from Senator Whitehouse. He writes the following: Dear Attorney General Garland, we write to request that you appoint a special counsel to investigate possible violations of federal ethics and tax laws by Associate Justice of the Supreme Court Clarence Thomas. Over the past year, public reporting and Senate investigations have uncovered evidence of repeated and willful omissions of gifts and income from Justice Thomas's financial disclosure reports required by the Ethics in the Government Act. The Senate is investigating these omissions as it considers improvements to ethics and tax laws. The scale of the potential ethics violations by Justice Thomas and the willful pattern of disregard for ethics laws exceeds the conduct of other government officials investigated by the Department of Justice for similar violations. The breadth of omissions uncovered to date and the serious possibility of additional tax fraud and false statement violations by Justice Thomas and his associates warrant the appointment of a special counsel to investigate this misconduct. The Senate is not a prosecutorial body, and the Supreme Court has no fact-finding function of its own, making the executive role all the more important if there is ever to be any complete determination of the facts. And then, Harry, before turning it over to you here, as part of Senator Whitehouse and also Senator Wyden's request that Garland appoint a special counsel to investigate Clarence Thomas, they include two lists, one of his likely undisclosed gifts from the MAGA Republican donor Harlan Crow. And you see here everything from yacht trips to Russia, helicopter rides to Russia, tuition for grandnephew, round-trip flights on private jets. And then on the other list is likely undisclosed gifts from Wayne Huizenga as well, another person who is funding this lavish lifestyle of Thomas, more meals and lodging and private jets. And so it's a big deal that this is taking place before our eyes. What do you make of this all, Harry?
So that's the first point. It is a big deal. And this is a shot across the bow for sure. I mean, they've been fighting about ethical violations, revelations. Now they're saying criminal laws have been violated. So that is really designed to catch everyone's attention, including yours and mine. Second point is, these lists, they are friggin' unbelievable. He's been like a ward of this rich guy his entire life. And it is stunning. Even the things we have found out have just dribbled out with, the dog ate it and, I had it somewhere kinds of excuses with really humongous gifts and furnishings of all kind that have led him to lead a rich person's life, which he, had said many years ago. If he couldn't get more money, he might step down, and that got everybody's attention and fast. And again, on by whatever Harlan Crow's role in individual cases, we are talking about definitely just a big piggy bank for the conservative movement. And by the way, they also mentioned Ginny Thomas in here. So those are two big points. And man, he's been a total scofflaw and really not responding to the Senate at all. The third point, though, is, I think they probably understand that it's going to be a theatrical gesture. First of all, special counsels are where there's a conflict. So let's say Clarence Thomas has committed a crime. Why is it that the Justice Department, Merrick Garland, couldn't themselves investigate it? Hard to say. The people of the country think, oh, Merrick Garland could never investigate maybe, but a Republican justice of the other side. But I think they well understand this is not going to get green lighted, right? It's not, we're not going to see USA versus Thomas, but nevertheless, it's highlighting, it's upping the ante. And as I say, a shot across the bow, making it clear that this list of violations are completely unsettling. They are long, they are rich, and they've obviously, furnished the whole life that Justice Thomas is leading, and that has been, just a big part of his general positioning as a good soldier for the conservative movement. So the whole thing does stink. His refusal to respond stinks, and White House and Wyden are on the warpath about it. I think, though, this is a sort of screen gesture play for media, which it will get, rather than an actual effort to get DOJ to bring a criminal case against an associate justice of the Supreme Court. Yeah, go ahead.
To your point, will it have the media impact that it perhaps should? Should there be this growing narrative out there? And should this be what is leading the coverage every single day of the media versus what they choose to cover? I mean, when you are an editor, when you are a producer, the power of your camera or the power of your pen often reflects your values and your principles as a network. It's why I think it's very important, even if it's not obvious at first that something comes of this letter. I think it's important that people know the types of trips that Clarence Thomas undoubtedly went on, that he is quite literally on the take, that he got over $4 million in gifts, which he refused to disclose. There are lots of cases that crisscross with the types of cases that Harlan Crow and his billionaire benefactors would want him to rule in certain ways. Clarence Thomas, as you and I, as practitioners, students of the Supreme Court as well, over these years know, Clarence Thomas before never said a word. And the Supreme Court never asked a question, didn't do anything, sat back, waited for the opportunity. And now that he took the gifts while all this time, lived a lavish lifestyle quietly, and then once they had the power, enact a extremist agenda that is out of line and out of whack with 70 to 75% of the American people. And
90,
no one's really talking about
when it comes to Thomas, it's 90. And look, you got to understand with him that we're doing on Talking Feds a whole sort of series on Abe Fortas. He's a name that won't ring a bell except to your older listeners, but he's the one justice who had to step down from the Supreme Court for ethical violations. He was forced out. He had one contract that he didn't fully disclose. It was such chump change, pennies, next to what Thomas has done. And as part of that podcast, we have ethical experts come on and say, oh my God, Thomas blows Fortis out of the water and the overall scheme. And then again, the way this is sort of dribbled out, would it not have been for guys like you and ProPublica, et cetera, we wouldn't have known. And look, just ask yourself, you have different arrangements where somebody shows up, say with Fortis, you know why you want them. It's good for, one appearance. Why does Harlan Crow want to pay $4 million? It's got to be worth it to him and his conservative friends. That tells you all you need to know, that this is rotten, and it's not just, just a couple buddies and, good friends who go on trips together. This is a payment with an expectation in kind that's not exactly the same as a crime, not exactly the same as an ethical violation, but it stinks to high heaven, as no ethical conduct of a Supreme Court justice ever has.
Harlan Crow, it should also be added, has Hitler paintings in his office, which may or may not actually even be authentic Hitler paintings, right, as some of art historians did some digging there. But I mean, he justifies it and says, well, the reason I have these Hitler paintings and paintings by other genocidal maniacs is it just makes us reflect upon the dark days. Oh, okay. And I'm sure the same thing with that $4 million has no reciprocity in mind as well. It's the constant gaslighting, but that's why I think it's so important that everybody subscribe to Harry Litman's YouTube channel. Harry's one of I'm going to brag about you, Harry. I think one of the only people who's ever, I'm sure it's not only one, but it's still as impressive as you get, who's clerked for 2 Supreme Court justices. Doing that once is a pretty big deal. He's done it twice. He was a leader in the DOJ. He knows his stuff. And so when I start off and I go, Harry runs the Talking Feds YouTube channel, I'm underselling him slightly. But if you want to get the best, most granular analysis, though, in ways that you can understand and access, because this stuff is all about our democracy, please subscribe to the Talking Feds YouTube channel right now and check out the podcast as well. Thanks, Harry.
Thank you, Ben.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.